Hello and welcome to a very special session of Digital Futures, where we'll be looking at Agentic AI. And I'm delighted to have as our guest speaker today, Daniel Bolojan. Daniel Bolojan and I go back a long way, longer than I was aware. I once gave a lecture at Mincu School of Architecture in Bucharest, where Daniel was a student. And I don't know what I said exactly, but I think I triggered off something which has proved to be very beneficial for architecture as a whole. Daniel subsequently shifted away from Mincu, decided that wasn't going to give him the answers, and went to study at Angewandte School in Vienna under Zaha Hadid and Patrik Schumacher. He subsequently went on to work for Wolf Pricks and became the lead AI specialist in the Deep Himmelb project, which is one of the most significant, has been one of the most significant investigations into the potential of AI in architectural circles. Alongside that, Daniel he first came to FIU as a visiting professor and then took up an assistant professorship at Florida Atlantic University at Fort Lauderdale, just north of Miami. But we're still in close contact. Daniel is a long-standing member of Digital Futures. He actually was part of the original team when Digital Futures went online in the year of COVID, 2020, and was responsible for staying up overnight for many nights to sort out the whole the computational system of signing up for various options. Digital Futures now has kind of opened up beyond its original origin, which was an interaction between Tongji University in Shanghai and American universities. It's now opened up to a fully online platform. Digital Futures China still exists, but Digital Futures International operates in 10 different languages throughout the year. Anyway, Daniel is a very esteemed colleague and has made some astonishing contributions to Digital Futures over the years. Today, we're going to deal with something that really is possibly the hottest topic in terms of the whole Digital Futures agenda, agentic AI. It's something that's been on the scene of computational science as a whole. People have been talking about it for, I guess, over a year now, and it's really the hot topic. But it's yet to feed fully into the world of architecture, although I've come across a number of comments being made by architects. Now it seems all of a sudden we have this potential opening up to us. Daniel has been part of a book, which the four of us been putting together this book, the AI Design Revolution. Daniel Bolojan, Wan Yuhe, who's also with us today, and Theodoros Galanis, and everyone has been talking about agentic AI. Wan Yu hasn't been able to refer to it explicitly because of certain non-disclosure agreements, but it is the topic that everyone is talking about. And maybe I can just kind of read out just briefly what I say in the introduction to the book. With agentic AI, the logic of design is further reconfigured beyond generative AI. The role of the architect shifts from being the curator to becoming the orchestrator of a range of agents, each addressing a different concern. With agentic systems, AI becomes an active design participant rather than a passive generative tool, enabling architecture to be approached as an evolving process of negotiation rather than as a fixed problem that needs to be solved. In this new paradigm, agentic systems do not simply generate forms or optimize predefined parameters. Rather, these systems are charged with their own modality and logic, with their own design intent, operating with a multimodal scenario. So, for example, a structural agent might be used to simulate structural behavior, an environmental agent to analyze energy performance, and while a spatial agent to optimize circulation patterns, an aesthetic agent to address aesthetic concerns, and so on. With agentic AI, then AI extends its remit from being a passive generator to an active negotiator. As such, agentic systems help to frame and reframe the design problem itself by proposing options, critiquing outcomes, managing trade-offs between competing criteria such as performance, cost, structure, and cultural intent, and revising strategies as priorities shift. Within this multimodal domain, a distributed network of specialized agents negotiates and opens a dialogue of possibilities. As such, design emerges not through consensus, but out of the tension between different competing agents. Theodoros Galanis also refers to it in the context of environmental design. Rather than simply addressing performance after the design process, agentic systems actively steer design exploration by coordinating multiple specialized AI agents, each focusing on different domains, such as energy, daylight, comfort, carbon, Microsoft, or code compliance, and orchestrating their interaction with simulation agents, predictive models, and design software. These specialized agents start to work synergistically, performing multi-objective optimization across diverse domains simultaneously. What emerges then is a form of intelligent collaboration that allows for a more intuitive and fluid interfaces between the user and AI, engendering new forms of collaboration where AI is seen less as a separate tool and more as an integrated, intelligent collaborator, a partner in the creative problem-solving context. But crucially, the architect remains in charge. The architect defines priorities, interprets trade-offs, and makes value-based decisions, while agentic AI handles complexity, speed, and scale. In this way, agentic AI enables performance to become an intrinsic and formative aspect of design, augmenting human judgment rather than replacing it. This should be seen as a revolution within a revolution. In other words, if AI is the new design revolution, within the context of that, what we're getting is something radically different from generative AI, radically different from that, and something that really is reconfiguring the whole process. To my mind, this is probably the most important thing that's out there on the horizon right now. Everyone's talking about it. Then all of a sudden, we're getting architects engaging with this process. So I'm delighted to be able to welcome Daniel Bolojan to talk both about the topic as a whole and also about the new platform Versur that he has just launched. Daniel, welcome. It's great to see you.
Daniel, thank you. It's very great to be here. I always enjoy participating in this kind of talks here at DigitalFUTURES. So yeah, I agree with the introduction that Neil gave about how important and how current this topic is. And what I would like to do is at the beginning of the presentation, I would like to perhaps walk through some developments, like how perhaps we ended up to this point of agentic AI, and why perhaps this is considered as a actually very valuable kind of step forward. My presentation pretty much is going to deal then, I'm going to try to look from this kind of perspective of computational design and how different kind of paradigms are shifting the way that we are thinking about perhaps design. And I'm going to look from this kind of focus on learning systems, multimodal models, or multimodal world models to be more precise there. And then also perhaps how agent-based kind of reasoning can fundamentally change the way we think about design, computation, creativity, and architecture more broadly. And for sure, for a long period, if we go back a couple of years or a couple of decades, it was always perceived that one of the challenges that we have when it comes to developing intelligent machines, it's a problem of hardware. And very often, in a way, we're thinking of the problem as if we just have enough, a GPU and compute to throw at the problem, we can, in a way, develop machines that are actually intelligent. And what happened is more recently, it became clear that this hurdle was not necessarily a hardware, like a GPU kind of problem, but it was mostly about the way that we process information and how we reason over it, and how we have systems that learn from that information. And most of you are already familiar with this. In recent years, creative industries and also broader industries, they experience a surge of research and experimentation when it comes to AI, and especially the generative AI side of things. And we are all familiar now with these kind of models like GANs, DALL-E, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion models. These are all kind of key points, in this kind of evolution, but they all derive in a way from certain innovation that happened when it comes to compute more than or computational kind of problem rather than the compute problem. Yeah. So if you're looking in a way at this kind of idea again, this shift became very clear when we start to have this kind of neural networks being introduced, and where we start to have this kind of algorithms that are able to learn from a vast amount of data. So the problem was not so much like any longer that it's a problem of compute again. It's a problem of the computational kind of models that we are building, like neural networks and so on. And for that, perhaps many of you are familiar with the paper "Attention is All We Need." So that's the paper that introduced in a way the transformer architecture, which is currently, let's say, perhaps at the base of most of the models that we are currently engaged with. So transformers models kind of showed previous limitations that we had with other types of neural networks, like recurrent neural networks or long short-term memory networks. And there were certain inefficiencies that were not so much having to do with computation or with compute, with hardware. It was mostly inefficiencies when it comes to the way that an algorithm was processing information. And we ended up with this kind of idea of self-attention, that self-attention kind of algorithm that allowed us in a way to process in parallel more complex tasks and more complex data sets. And like that, we ended up with models like GPT and other models that probably we are familiar with today. And for sure, it's worth mentioning that to understand this, we have to understand this kind of shift from expert system and learning systems. And we have to look at them as, expert systems are pretty much types of systems that just rely on hard-coded kind of rules and information, while learning systems are a type of systems that are able to learn or to infer just from examples. Now, another good framing here is also to think about is this kind of aspect of what Andrew Karpathy is describing as software 1.0 versus software 2.0. And this refers in a way to this kind of like way of thinking about machines and software, where in one instance is as a human expert, you are the one kind of writing the code and functions and so on. And the other software 2.0, whereas what we are doing, we are just creating a sort of architecture of a system, and that's we present that system with a lot of examples, and then we have the system in a way learning by example. So it's not so much like as experts, as humans experts, we are the ones encoding and creating the functions for the system to learn, but it's mostly we are just showing a lot of examples, and the system starts to learn by itself. Now, another kind of aspect that perhaps, sorry, I kind of skipped here. Yeah. Another aspect that it's perhaps important to think about, and it's important to consider, especially when it comes to agentic AI and how perhaps we arrive to this kind of idea of agentic AI, is the kind of aspect of retrieval versus generative computing. So until recently, like the way that you process information is pretty much you send a request. That request is sent to a data center somewhere close by, and then that data center fetches in a way the response in a way to your query, and then it's sending you the data in a way. But I think we are in a part where perhaps the way that we are going to engage with computation is mostly going to be through generative computing rather than retrieval kind of computing. And what I mean by that, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Genie from Google, but Genie from Google, everything that you can see here, this is generated on the go. So this is not pre-processed and then shared, but it's mostly like you as a user can just use perhaps arrows and just move around. So in this case, like I can either use my mouse and then the world start to be created based on that movement. So it's not so much like that things are pre-processed and then shared, but the entire like world is being generated on the go. As you can see here, you just have the keys that you can use, left and right and forward and backwards. So these are like really like interesting kind of ideas, because in the end, then what's happening is that we might have this kind of models that they are not generating information and then share it with us, but they are automatically generating information on the go. So in that sense, like we can think of this as a sort of generative computing. Now, another topic that is quite important to think about is this aspect of world models, and the kind of idea of like are these kind of models, although they are super impressive, as you've seen Genie from Google, are these models actually capable to understand the world, like, and understand the physics perhaps of the world or other underlying kind of principles of the world? So there are multiple kind of experiments that different researchers, they are trying to develop these kind of models, Google being one of them. And then also for sure, when we look at Sora from OpenAI, and in all this, like you can see all these kind of examples, the snow and the way that people are walking, and they all feel super realistic. And the interesting part is that these are not hard-coded kind of information or knowledge. The only thing that this kind of network or model was able to see was just a couple of frames or many frames of videos, where it started in a way to understand perhaps this kind of physics of a world. And in that regard, then we can also think about, like, is it important to have one modality or multiple modalities in a way, if we want to have a model that is able to understand the complexity of the world? And for sure, like when it comes to that, we can say that one modality can give, in a way, a certain perspective on that reality, versus if we start to bring in like other kind of senses and so on, other kind of modalities, that's going to help, in a way, the model like have a better, more complete kind of picture of that world model in a way. And we are all familiar probably by now with all these kind of models, DALL-E, Llama, BART, and some of them actually, like BART and Palm, they are kind of left behind in the dust right now. I think there are other stronger models that are almost like it feels like every single month there is another strong model that comes out, which is very fascinating. But the interesting part again about this is that these kind of models, they start to show and start to question perhaps also our understanding of how we learn about the physical world. Because in very many instances, as humans, we don't learn how to operate in the real world by engaging necessarily with the fundamental principles of that world. And what I mean by that, in this instance, this is an image or a video generated by Sora OpenAI. And in this case, you might wonder, like, how is the model able to actually learn the physics of simulating this kind of apples dropping and then the splash and everything? And it's very interesting because if you think about it, also as humans, we are not necessarily like when it comes to learning how gravity works and cause and effect, we are not so much learning gravity by learning the formula of gravity. So what we are doing is like we are probably just observing in a way, if I let go to an object, it's going to drop. And by that, in a way, through that kind of observation, we start to kind of understand the law of gravity, and not so much like through necessarily physics. Yeah. And that's an interesting aspect, because there are certain researchers that they looked at this kind of problem of can we solve problems just through observation? And in this case, what you have is you have a diffusion model that was able to look at this kind of maze puzzles, and you have then a model that is able, just through pixels, without being exposed to any kind of shortest path kind of algorithms, just through images, just through pixels, is able to solve, in a way, that maze. Yeah, which is really amazing, because that means, in a way, that just through observation, without any kind of knowledge of, that the actual algorithm was able to just, predict a correct shortest path in a way. And now this is something interesting, because when we think about the multimodality, it's this kind of aspect, as I was mentioning, the more modalities you have, a better or more complete picture of that world you're going to get. And that's an important observation because we have to understand that, the limitations of certain models that we are currently engaging with. And one of those limitations is that we cannot really consider that one single model by itself will be able to answer in a way all these kind of questions and to be able to understand all the facets in a way of a problem. So in this case, like we might say that rather than a single intelligent system, intelligence perhaps emerges from interaction between multiple systems. And a design similarly should be understood not necessarily as an optimization towards a single solution, but more as a negotiation across multiple agents, representations, and objectives. And this is something that, those of you that perhaps are familiar with some of my work, I constantly refer back to this book by Jeff Hawkins, The Thousand Brain Theory. And it's a beautiful kind of theory about like how we as humans develop a complete picture of the reality that we engage with. And in the book, he's kind of describing like how important it is for us to have multiple, almost like smaller brains that are responsible for different kind of perceptions of a certain object or a certain world that we are interacting with. And this is something that, kind of aligns and with kind of idea that perhaps, rather than thinking about a single model that it's able to understand all facets of a problem of the world, perhaps we should look at an idea of how can we have multiple specialized or more generalist kind of models and how they interact together and how through interaction they end up in a way with a certain understanding of the problem. Now, another interesting idea to think about is this kind of idea of language models as computing interfaces. And Andrej Karpathy, again, argues that larger language models function primarily as interfaces of computation, not as computation itself. So they allow, humans to express intent in natural language, which is then translated into actions across tools, code, models, and systems. And then we can say that the intelligence shift happens at the interface kind of level, moving from rigid symbolic commands to intent-driven kind of orchestration. So if you look at how some of these models work, some of these models, they need a sort of system prompt, they need a sort of context that they work with. And Andrew Karpathy, again, he's like making this kind of parallel between how computers work currently, because, for example, for a computer, if I send a request to a computer, that request has to be stored in a RAM, a temporary kind of memory. And then with that kind of request in that kind of temporary memory, the computer is going to figure out, in a way, the solution to the query, and then it's going to give you, an answer. Yeah. So Andrew Karpathy, he's creating this kind of parallel. Then we could think about language models almost like computers, where we say that the context of a language model, it's similar. It's a kind to the RAM that you have in an actual computer. Now, another interesting aspect to think about is this kind of idea of thinking fast and slow by Daniel Kahneman. And is this kind of idea of like that we as humans, we always operate under two systems, system one and system two. System one, it's a more intuitive kind of system that pretty much we learn through imitation and through patterns. While system two, it's a slower kind of system that we mostly engage in when we engage in critical thinking and when we engage in logical kind of thinking. We start to process information in a more slower way. And this is also like something that perhaps can be understood also if we think about a game of chess, perhaps. So if you think about chess, just think about a very fast-paced game of chess. So when you play, this kind of blitz kind of games, you're not going to sit and consider every single move. Like, you're not going to spend a lot of time like reasoning about every single move. a lot of the moves that you're going to make, they are going to be very instinctual, very like pattern based, or very like behavior based. This is something that I learned perhaps in the past, a sort of pattern that I learned in the past, and that's how I'm going to act and very fast in the blitz game. Yeah. But if I'm in a game that actually allows me in a way for time to think, then I'm going to think. I'm going to engage perhaps in system two kind of thinking, where I start to be more analytical and more. I'm going to try to predict a couple of steps ahead, and I'm going to play the game in that kind of way. So this is perhaps a good way of thinking about this kind of idea of system one and system two. And the reason why I'm bringing that up, and also the reason why you start to see here some references to AlphaGo, is this kind of inherent problem that we have with a lot of the models that we currently engage with. And what that problem is that a lot of these models, although they are very impressive, they are still machines that are giving you this kind of fast, intuitive kind of answers. They're not necessarily engaging in a rigorous kind of critical, logical kind of search or thinking to solve in a way a problem. So it's always going to default to certain patterns and certain distributions that they are in data set, and statistical kind of distributions that the model learned from the data set that was trained with. And why that is necessarily a question, why is that a problem? Well, it could be a problem because, we have, when it comes to design, very often in design, we have to engage in a lot of problem or creative problem thinking and problem solving in a way. So do we want to have then models that pretty much what they are doing, they're just repeating in a way past patterns and just giving them out to us like in a different kind of form? Or do we really want to have certain systems that are able to actually learn from first principle perhaps, and learn a way of reasoning through a design problem, and then through that reasoning in a way give a certain solution? And I like to always show this example from John Giro about this kind of idea of how generalization and how knowledge can be, or certain things learned can be transferable to other kind of domain. So here, as you can see, like you have this kind of question of, you have a large block of stone, and how are you going to move in a way that object? And initially, the starting position there was, you just put as much raw power as possible, so as many people can drag that. That's how you were able to move in a way that object. But then later, we start to develop this understanding that if we start to place perhaps logs underneath, that's going to lead in a way to less friction between the block and the ground. That's going to make it much easier in a way to move that object. And that lesson then transferred in a way to this kind of idea of like, if we have some wheels underneath an object, we can create in a way this kind of objects that we can move easily around. And that's how we start to design these kind of ideas of shopping carts, suitcases, cars, and other kind of objects, let's say. And that could be true then also, like if you follow in a way this logical process through, you start to realize that the problem there from the very beginning, from the very start, is how do I reduce friction? So this is almost like if we try to go to think from first principle and really strip down in a way the problem and just think from first principle, we start to realize that the main core problem is friction. Yeah. So how do I reduce friction? So this is an interesting then generalization of those kind of ideas of perhaps that's how we can get to the Hyperloop, where we completely remove now friction. Yeah, we are in a frictionless kind of void that we can now move objects at a certain speed because of that reducing friction. Yeah. So this is an interesting, again, observation, just because this is one of the questions that we have. Do we want to have then AI models that pretty much are just very good system one type of model? They are able to give us very fast, intuitive kind of answers that are relying completely on past learned data, or we are also interested in systems that are able to look at completely new problems and come up with completely new solutions to those problems. Yeah. So in that kind of line of thinking, this is where, you know, a lot of the ideas, those ideas are almost like a seed for what Versur is. And what Versur is, it's a platform currently that engages with agentic AI. So it's an agent-based, or not agent-based, sorry, workflow-based agentic AI that allows you in a way to build agents, workflows, or different kind of workflows that you know, as designers we can engage with. Why that is important? Because what's happening very often, like I was explaining about 1,000 brain theory, about system one, system two, Daniel Kahneman. The problem very often in design is that design is quite complex as a problem, because we are constantly working between different kind of levels of abstraction. We are constantly working, you know, different kind of levels of specificity. And it's quite hard in a way then to think about like one AI model that can fit in a way all these kind of needs and switch constantly between like abstract, not abstract, specific, not specific, deterministic versus generative, and so on. So then we need in a way certain systems perhaps that allows us to encode these kind of ideas at the more granular level, where we as designers, we can in a way decide where we want to use perhaps a more deterministic model versus where we want to use a more predictive model. And what I mean by that, for example, when it comes to generative design and architecture, for sure, like it's amazing to work with generative design, and we saw a lot of positive kind of outcomes out of generative design. But it's very tricky then to work with generative design generative AI, sorry, when it comes to aspects that are very pragmatic. For example, if I want to design a structure, am I going to use a model that is generative, that has the risk of hallucinating? So I'll say that in those kind of aspects, perhaps it's more trickier in a way to engage with generative AI, just because the consequences of something going bad are quite big, yeah? While if we say we just want to engage in a design exploration when it comes to generative AI, we have more leeway, because in that case, then hallucinations that a lot of these kind of models are very, we know them by these kind of hallucinations. Those hallucinations, they become a feature, not necessarily a bug. But if you want to use them for something that is more pragmatic and has to be more rigorous, that feature becomes then a bug, yeah? So that's why then, you know, as architects, and when we think about design process and architectural kind of process, we always have to switch between all these kind of modes of operation, between, you know, something very pragmatic, speculative, and deterministic, and so on. And all of them, they are part of the same design kind of process. So the question then was, how can we do that by having a system that allows us in a way to operate at all these kind of levels, and not only allows us to operate at all these levels, but allows us also to orchestrate in a way the entire design process into this kind of coherent kind of workflows. So for me, like I see these almost like a logical progression of until now, we in architecture, we were mostly thinking about this kind of idea of parametric relationships and interdependencies between geometries and so on. So we are all familiar with this kind of computational design kind of idea. And I think what we are moving towards how do we activate, in a way, the reasoning layer, let's say, of architecture? So sort of like iterative reasoning that allows us perhaps to develop a sort of logic, and then have a system that allows us now to iterate through the logic, not so much through the geometry of it, which was the case with Grasshopper. So in that case, we can say that when it comes to architecture, when it comes to geometry in architecture, we have the infrastructure in a way for that. We have like different kind of beam models. We have like parametric models. We have different kind of software that allows us in a way to engage this side of architecture, this layer in a way of architecture that deals with geometry. But we don't really have that kind of reasoning infrastructure at the moment. The only reasoning infrastructure that we have is bounded in a way to the level of the practice or company, where you have different kind of human agents interacting with one another and developing a sort of working kind of knowledge. So in that sense, like, it's not so much what Versur is looking at. It's not so much like just another beam or another generative kind of sketch, but it's looking at this kind of idea of how can we build then architectural intelligences, meaning that how can we create systems that are able to think perhaps and reason through design problems in a similar way that humans do. And for that, in a way, the way that the app, the interface it's or infrastructure is developed is through this kind of composable cognitive blocks, and I'm going to explain that in a second. So in that sense, you know, it's a workflow-based agentic AI system that is able to iterate, build with you. Now, when it comes to, you know, all these kind of building blocks, Versur has a couple of cognitive primitives. And what I mean by that is it has certain abilities, perception, reasoning, generation abilities, evaluation, aspects of memory, how to orchestrate in a way different kind of workflows and so on. And then when we put this together, we end up with this kind of workflows in a way that perhaps we can call architectural intelligences. Now, for before I go into details about it, I would like to a bit cover this kind of idea of what we mean by agentic AI, and perhaps try to make certain distinctions. So most of us, we are perhaps familiar with this kind of AI kind of assistant interaction, and most of you that you're working with perhaps ChatGPT or even perhaps some image model, text to image model. What you have there, you always have this kind of structure where you have a user input, you have a system prompt, then you have the actual model generating based on the user input and the system prompt, and then you have the outcome. So everything pretty much, it's a black box there. As a human, you cannot really see what's going on inside. And also beyond that, you're not able to perhaps intervene in the process, in the thinking process of that specific agent, yeah, or not agent, sorry, model. So we call that, you know, then these AI assistants. Now, when we talk about AI agents, they are a different kind of architecture, a different kind of way of thinking and organizing these kind of models, where rather than just having a system prompt and a user input, we have a system that is composed of a brain, and that brain could be any kind of language model that is able to reason. And then that brain should be able to have access to certain memory and certain tools that it can access and it can interact with. And then when we talk about agentic workflows, what we are referring to, we can say that agentic workflows, they are structured orchestrations of models, tools, and steps designed to accomplish complex tasks collaboratively. So rather than thinking or rather than having this kind of single autonomous kind of actor, they define how multiple components interact, including context handling, step sequencing, tool invocation, and iterative evaluation. So they focus on the architecture of action rather than the autonomy, let's say, of the individual agent. And why these are important then to think about them is because, as I was mentioning before, in architecture, we always have to deal with this kind of back and forth between different kind of modes of operation, between like something that is deterministic to something that is generative, something that, you know, it's specialized knowledge versus something that's more general kind of knowledge. And we always have to go back and forth in a way, different kind of levels of abstraction and so on. So one model alone is not going to be able to capture that. But perhaps if we engage in a sort of agentic kind of workflow process, that's going to allow us in a way to develop all this kind of relationship between different kind of modes of operation that we are engaging with as architects. Now, to give a very brief kind of comparison between the three modes here. So when we say an AI assistant, what we are saying is a sort of system that is a problem-driven interaction consisting of user input, system instruction, language model, and a generated output. When we talk about an agent, we are talking about a single autonomous entity with an internal reasoning loop that executes the set of tasks it's responsible for. And then when we talk about agentic workflows, we are talking about an orchestrated sequence of tasks distributed across multiple agents, models, tools, services, executed in a dynamic and iterative manner. Now, if we are thinking about from aspect of autonomy, like this kind of aspect of agency, when it comes to an AI assistant, there is no agency there. There is no autonomy. It operates reactively and only responds when prompted by a user. So this is, again, reference back to system one type of thinking, where pretty much the model is just reactively kind of answering, intuitively kind of answering based on statistical priors in a way, or patterns, statistical pattern that it learned during the training kind of process. Okay. Then when we are talking about an AI agent has a higher amount of agency or autonomy, as it's capable to continuously observe, reason, and act to achieve a certain goal with a minimal kind of input from the user. Now, when we are talking about agentic workflows, we are talking about distributed autonomy or agency, where individual components may act autonomously within a predefined orchestration and control structure. So here, like as I was mentioning, in agentic kind of workflow, we can think about different kind of modes where you have generative models and predictive models, and other kind of models that are more varied. If you are thinking about that, the generation or the decision making of these kind of models, when we think then about an AI assistant is simply a single step response generation based on the current prompt and context window. An AI agent has ongoing decision making through a perceived reason act kind of loop. And then agentic workflows, it's a more structured, multi-step decision making governed by explicit workflows, where you have all these kind of phases of evaluation stages, coordination logics, and so on. Now, another aspect that is extremely crucial when it comes to design and architecture is this aspect of tractability, and how do you trace back in a way, not tractability, traceability, sorry. How do you trace back in a way the decision process or the reasoning of the model? Currently, if you're engaging with an AI assistant, where you just have a system prompt and a user prompt, and you have a very, very limited, you're pretty much operating with a black box, and it's quite hard actually to understand why a model in a way gave a certain output. If we engage with an AI agent, we have a certain degree of traceability there, and we can look perhaps at chain of thought in a way. Certain models, more recent models, they have this kind of ability to display also that chain of thought, and we have that aspect, but we cannot really intervene perhaps into that process of how the agent decides, certain things, in case that it decides something that we are not necessarily, we don't agree, we cannot really change that. Now, when it comes to agentic AI, agentic workflows, they offer a very high traceability, because why is that? It's because every single step in the workflow could be traced, as a sort of reasoning step that we can, go through, and we can see, in a way, where human intervention is needed versus where not. Now, going back to Versur. So Versur, as I mentioned before, it's built from this kind of very simple composable cognitive blocks. So as a user, then what you're interacting with a couple of blocks that offer, a certain functionality. In this case, you have what you're looking at here. You're looking at a sort of model that it's able to visually, in a way, analyze images. Then you have that model that has a memory. You have an agent that evaluates the analysis. Then based on that kind of analysis, you also have a routing kind of agent, an agent that it's aware of downstream and upstream kind of connections. And it's able to then decide, like, based on this analysis, based on this kind of user input, this is the correct path in a way that has to be followed in this specific workflow for the user, or to solve in a way the query that the user provided. So once again, like composable cognitive blocks, and currently there I have multiple of these kind of blocks. As you can see here, you have thinking of the model, you have memory, you have exploration agents, you have context builder, which is quite important in a way for AI agents, in a way to understand correctly the context of the problem that you're trying to solve. Evaluation agents, sub-agents. Sub-agents are pretty much this kind of idea of how do you have multiple nested logics or nested AI agents within one larger workflow. And what this allows you to do then, it allows you to develop a sort of logic. Let's say I'm just thinking about how do I solve a problem structurally. So I'm going to have one single workflow that deals only with structure. And then I'm going to think about like another agentic workflow that deals just with aesthetics. So now I'm going to have two agents, two workflow-based kind of agents that are going to be able, I will be able to connect them and to allow them to interact with one another. So this is what sub-agent kind of block is kind of doing. It's allowing you to take, in a way, workflows that you already developed and allows you to interact those with other kind of workflows. Now, Versur, it's a multi-editor platform, and there's a reasoning behind that. So currently, you have a block editor or a workflow editor kind of platform or editor, and what you're doing there, you're mostly engaging with developing workflows, developing the logic of the agents, developing the agentic workflow kind of logic, and then the canvas, the second kind of interface, the canvas allows you in a way to interact and iterate in a more faster way with workflows that you already developed. So for example, you can develop a workflow just purely as a node graph, as you can see on the left side. And then that can be deployed in a way into a more friendly kind of interface. And as a user, you can then interact much faster in a way with that specific workflow. So as you can see here, the workspace or the node or block editor consists of multiple blocks with different kind of functionality. Currently, about 28 to 30 blocks. Each one of them like different functionality, meaning like reasoning capabilities, vision, methods, managing, like almost like data management kind of blocks and so on. It also has like this kind of almost like workspace or a session kind of management, where it allows you to simply develop different kind of agents or workflows and then being able to connect them. Here, what you're looking at also, you have different kind of functionality when it comes to, I'm going to go back probably to play this again. Just a second. So you have different functionality when it comes to, once you're able to deploy these kind of workflows. Once you deploy them, you can also like trace now the deployment state of those kind of workflows. So in case that you want to perhaps develop a workflow and you want to integrate it, let's say in Revit or in a Grasshopper, you can easily integrate that, and you can have like a logs in a way of what's happening with that kind of workflow, how many times it ran, like if there are errors in it and so on, yeah. You have here also a different kind of interfaces, like you have a prompt panel, you have a chat panel, and you have a agentic panel. The agentic panel allows you to build through an agentic kind of system to build workflows. So just by querying or by a prompt, you ask, like, I'm trying to develop a prompt improving kind of agents, and you have the system in a way then proposing to your workflow that will help in a way to accomplish that. I'm going to just continue here. Then you have also the Canvas editor. This is the example or the interface that I was mentioning that for some reason, sorry, like I see that it's a very low resolution. But it's an interface that allows you then to interact in a more user-friendly kind of interface, to take all this kind of very complex kind of logic that you can develop in the node editor and translate it or deploy it into an interface that you can interact easily with. Now, this Canvas editor as well has multiple kind of agentic capabilities, where as a user you have like modes of interacting with orchestrators, where you're just describing the task or the task that you're trying to engage with, and you have in a way an agentic orchestrator that is able to propose to you like which are the type of rows and models that you should use. Now, to give an example here, when it comes to workflows, because the way it's structured around idea of cognitive kind of blocks. It's able to take in a diverse amount of input data, and because of that, it's then able to address like different kind of architectural tasks. So in this case, what you're looking at an agent, as you can see, an agent that I'm setting it up for, which are the skills of the agents, which are the tools that the agent is going to use, it's going to be allowed to use or has at its disposal. And what's going to happen is that based on those kind of tools available to it, the agent is going to reason through and figure out, okay, when do I use what tool do I have to use to solve the problem? So in this case, the problem was that I inputted this floor plan, and as you can see, the floor plan right now, it's quite problematic. So you have the closet and the bedroom that had no doors, and the agent had to look through that specific floor plan, had to analyze it. And then based on the knowledge base, like in this case, Neufert, so I gave access to Neufert knowledge base. And based on that kind of knowledge base, has to understand like which are the standards in a way, which are the standards in a way when it comes to that kind of floor plan layout. And based on that is then making a determination and developing a plan. And with the tools that I'm providing to it, it's going to figure out, okay, these are the tools that I have to use in a way to solve this specific problem. And as you can see, in the end, like the agent is able to reason through and to propose in a way the correct solution there based on, again, Neufert and other kind of aspects. Same kind of workflow, like it's also can be applied to more speculative kind of aspects, like when it comes to design exploration. And here, the interesting part is that you can develop your own agents that are able to not only create for you prompts, but agents that are able to actually evaluate and assess in a way outcomes, and based on those kind of assessment, is able to route in a way the entire exploration in a certain direction or not. And here what you have, you see this kind of always you have this kind of style selector. So you have different kind of AI models that AI agents that are able to analyze the user input, analyze the thinking of the agent, and based on the kind of thinking, analyze which is the correct actual answer. So you have a sort of workflow that not only like reasons through like the user input, creates in a way like exploration, like design exploration, different kind of paths of exploration, and then based on those kind of exploration, you start to analyze, to evaluate, to select which is the appropriate kind of path forward. Now, another aspect that is quite important is the kind of idea of human in the loop. So it's very crucial then for the system to allow, in a way, human intervention in case that something perhaps it doesn't work the way that it's supposed to. And this is important, like again, for architecture, like we have, if we are dealing with aspects of pragmatic aspects of, code compliance or structural performance and so on. It's important then as a user to be able to define key points or breaking points, let's say, in the workflow where you want to make sure that I, as a human, I can verify in a way that specific outcome of the agents. And then only when approved, then I'm going to allow in a way the agent to continue the process. Or in case that's not the case, that the result is not a good result, then simply you can ask the agent to revise and to revisit in a way the problem and to give additional context. So here, as you can see, there are certain key points in this workflow that I defined as a user, and then the process is not going to continue until there is a human approval in a way. And only once I approve in a way the proposed kind of step, then you have the kind of workflow continuing. Here you see also this kind of console kind of panel that allows you in a way to trace every single step and allows you to look into like the inputs, the outputs, the reasoning of the agent, which were the tools that the agent used, which were the parameters that it used for the tools, and so on. So it gives you like a broad kind of traceability of the entire thinking process of the agent. Now, another aspect that I was briefly mentioning is this kind of idea of you can develop different kind of AI workflows and agentic AI kind of workflows. And those kind of workflows then can be deployed and integrated in any kind of any other interface that you're working with. That could be, like I mentioned, Revit, Rhino, and so on. And this is a very useful then operating kind of mode, just because, as I mentioned before, maybe sometimes is not the most friendly way to engage just with node-based. So this allows you at least the option to create or to interact in an interface that it's more friendly. So as you can see here, like first the workflow was developed, then the workflow was deployed. And once you have the workflow deployed, you can now interact with that in your interface, yeah? So this could be like, it also has like chat interfaces where you can create almost like your own agent, almost like your own chatbot. And then, you just interact with that in a chat interface rather than through the node-based interface. Now, another aspect in a way for these systems, in a way, as I mentioned, to be able to understand the problem and to understand the context of the problem, it's very important to have a way of developing a knowledge base, and also to be able to provide in a way the appropriate context to that model. And probably most of you also that you interacted with ChatGPT is the same kind of problem. Like if you're not able to describe correctly and precisely the problem to GPT, it's going to assume in a way certain things, and it's going to give you certain results that perhaps are not what you intended. So then it's quite important to be able to kind of model the context and to be able to provide the appropriate context to a model. So in this case, as you can see on the left side, you have the knowledge base where you're able to upload design briefs. You can upload like building code. You can input, Neufert in this case, architect manual, and then based on that kind of knowledge, the AI model now that they're developing, it's able to have access to that knowledge, and it's able to reason with the help of that kind of knowledge. Now, other aspects that are quite important is this kind of aspects of developing workflows, skills, and tools. So Versur allows you to develop your own workflows. And then once you have the workflows developed, you can publish these workflows with a larger community. And you can then interact like quite easily like that. You can also extract, or you can use other workflows that were shared by other kind of users. So as you can see here, You have a template window that allows you in a way to see how other users, what other users in a way published. Another aspect that is quite important is aspect of skills for an agent. And what skills are, they're almost like a sort of set of guidelines in a way of how the agent has to act, how it has to reason through, and how it has to output perhaps certain information. And right now, currently, Versur comes with skills that are already defined as Versur skills, but at the same time also allows in a way the users to create their own skills and publish those skills with others if they choose to. Now, probably you might wonder like what skills are. Skills are very similar to what system prompts are when it comes to AI assistants. And the last one is this aspect of tools. So the tools are like different kind of different kind of tools that the agent has at its disposal to try in a way to solve the problem. Yeah. So currently, Versur has a couple of tools that are available to any kind of agent. But at the same time, as a user, you can develop in a way your own kind of tools. For example, you can say, I want to have a tool that allows me to filter through the reasoning of the agent. And then that tool is going to output a very structured kind of reasoning of the agent. So as a user, then you can easily create that tool. And once you have that tool, you can attach that tool to your agent. And your agent is always going to be able then to access it and output in a way based on that. Or things that are more pragmatic, you can say, I'm going to have a tool that actually measures the area of something, of a floor plan or something. And then based on that, the tool is going to, the agent is going to read the tool and it's going to be able to reason when to use exactly that tool for what task to be able to solve in a way a problem. Now, what you're looking at here, this is a more complex than workflow, just showing you in a way the breadth of it, in the sense of like you can start with very simple 2 or 3 nodes kind of or blocks kind of workflows, and you can easily develop it to something more comprehensive, where in this case you have a entire like design exploratory in a way, where you have different kind of ways of which is the user input, which is the context that I have to build. Once I have the context, which are the styles and the requirements in a way that are described in the prompt. Do I have to create variations or I don't have to create variations? And then do I have to create variations? Okay, I'm going to create variations. How many variations do I have to create? So all this in a way, it's reasoning of the agent where as a user, I'm just prompting, just giving a prompt, and then you have the agent, in a way, trying to solve, in a way, the problem to all the kind of like quite extensive kind of workflow that you see here. So you see here, you have some outcomes that are quite abstract, and it's a question of then, is the agent going to be able now to look at these results and reason in a way which is a more appropriate result based on the input of the user? And you have this kind of variant selector, which is an AI agent that it's able to then think through and evaluate which is the appropriate kind of result there. And it's this kind of process of like, I'm going to create a lot of variations, and I'm going to create selection within groups of variations, and then from a big pool of options, I'm going to select. So to wrap this up, because probably you're quite some time here. So for me, I see this almost like a sort of switch or shift from designing objects. So we are not so much going to design objects any longer. Perhaps we are going to start to design intelligences. the same in a similar fashion, how in Grasshopper and computational design, pretty much we shifted the focus from the final shape of something. We shifted the focus to the almost the DNA of the shape that generates that shape. And here I see it could be a similar kind of transformation where mostly what we are looking at the reasoning layer of architecture and how we can operationalize that. So I'm going to conclude here, and I would love to engage in a discussion about this. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Daniel. Let me.
Should I stop sharing?
Yes. No. Well, you can. You can leave it on. It's okay. It's all right.
Okay.
I'm just trying to get myself get my video from. It's a bit tricky. Okay. Okay. First of all, let me. I've got a question. But Wanyu has a question too, and at the moment she's in Shenzhen. It's gone midnight there, so maybe I can invite Wanyu to ask her question first.
Sure.
Wanyu.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. It's really amazing, and congratulations for what you have achieved so far. Actually, I get a question from we are developing software so over a decade already. So there are some questions I can see here from my experience. So the question is, I think there are two sides. One is the decision-making process, which is really important here. Like what kind of decision criteria you're gonna have to make the design successful or the outcome successful. You mentioned the Neufer or some regulations. However, we understand that even architects, we only know Neufer or regulations. You can make it as a good designer. So there must be more things to make the correct decision as the knowledge base. So I would like to understand how you would establish that. This is the first question. And second is another side is you mentioned that you can establish your own like workflow of this agentic workflow, and then it's a more engineering or architectural software architectural question. It's how you would imagine you establish this system. It's gonna be a more open structure that you allow anyone to build their own workflow, as you have mentioned, or you're gonna build a benchmark that is kind of the best practice in the industry from yourself or from whoever.
I think
yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like I'm always coming from the perspective of it's very hard to develop one size fits all kind of solutions. And although like my ambition for sure is to have certain functionality and skills and tools that can be easily applicable or be used by anyone. At the same time, I'm also like aware of different nuances that every single practice might have. And in that sense, then I want to have it open and everyone can really like log in and just create their own workflows. And if you want to share those workflows with somebody else, you can share those. And if the community in a way wants to build in a way those workflows like that, I think that's beneficial, more beneficial for the industry than if I'm trying to create myself in a way a sort of best, almost like a state of the art kind of agent workflow. So for that question, yeah, I'm siding more towards the side of give the users more optionality so that they can create their own workflows. And if they want to develop, or if they want to deploy those workflows, in SketchUp, or if they want to deploy it in Revit or other kind of systems that they are working with in their practice, I think that's perfectly fine. Yeah. I think Versur has to be versatile enough to allow for all those kind of nuances that every single practice has. Now, for the first question, yes, that's a very, very good question about, design is more nuanced than that, like we cannot just input Neufert and get in a way a good design. And I think there's room then, for as a user, you can easily then create your own manuals, design manuals. And rather than having a Neufert as a knowledge base, you can easily like just input, you can input your own design manual. And the cool thing then, it's also that it's not so much that the agent is going to have access now to everything. It's going to have access to that specific, in a way, manual that you're specifying to. And why I'm saying this is because it might be that you have very sophisticated kind of workflow where at the beginning, for sure, you want to engage in more speculative kind of aspects of design. And for that specific phase of your workflow, for sure, you need, in a way, some design manual that it's more towards the speculative side versus more towards the end, perhaps, of the workflow, where you start to address, way more pragmatic aspects or structural or other kind of criteria. Yeah. So Versur then allows you, in a way, to for all this kind of granularity, in a way, for you as a user to define and decide, like, at this stage, at this part, this step in the workflow, I need something that's speculative. So that's going to be the context and the knowledge that I'm going to give to this specific agent. But at this step in the workflow, I'm going to give it this super pragmatic kind of context. Yeah. So it allows you, like, that's why, you have the kind of context builder. You can create a context for every single node. If every single node in the workflow is an agent, you can have for every single node in that workflow, you can have a different context. Yeah. So is that going to be something difficult? Probably is going to be a challenge, because probably as architects, we are not yet so accustomed to have our own design manuals, in a way. But I think it could be something that could emerge easily out of, you can have certain agents that then, unless, if you don't have a specific design manual with all the instructions, perhaps what you can do is you can say, I'm going to have an AI agent that looks at the projects that I have. So I just have to input a couple of PDFs or images, and then allow an agent to look at those and perhaps try to write down kind of design manual that it can observe from those. And perhaps that's a starting point for me. Then if I don't have a design manual, and then from there I can improve, the design manual, re-upload it, and have, the system be aware of those.
Okay, thank you. Actually, the two questions so I asked, it was associated to each other, because just as you mentioned, if you want to set up this a really good knowledge base, you have to set up a workflow or a preset model or preset workflow for everyone. Then people can get the kind of at least the bottom line or the benchmarks output.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it can be very random and can really be the outputs that you would like people to got. And sorry, one more question about, you mentioned the Revit and the SketchUp. What do you mean by that? Your workflow can incorporate with geometry generation?
So what you can do is you have like API blocks that you can send requests via API. So you just have to deploy the workflow. And once you have it deployed, then you can receive API calls from any kind of platform that allows you to send and receive API calls. So if you have like API calls in Revit, then you can easily like send the data knowledge, let's say from Revit, you send it to the agent in Versur, and then the agent in Versur solves certain things and then sends you back, in a way, that solution. So that's what I mean, like when I'm saying, you have this option to deploy your workflows. And once you deploy them, then you have access to an API kind of connection. You have access to the workflow from anywhere.
Okay, maybe I would like to learn more about that in the future. I thought there's other people also asking question. But
Yeah,
this
so
is if you can connect better with the geometry softwares, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I think what's happening is, and I don't know if Patrik is here, but I met with Patrik, with Zaha, like last year, and I was showing them like Versur, and we had this kind of discussion because like you cannot really, like, when it comes to all this kind of AI kind of models, we cannot really impose on practices to completely change the kind of tool that they are working with. And I think rather than trying to say you have to change Revit or AI or something, it's a more helpful approach will be to say how can we think of an ecosystem in a way of tools, and how can we allow in a way these tools to be orchestrated together. So then can I have Versur perhaps allow in a way to orchestrate communication between all this rather than asking you to change Revit or to change kind of tools, you know. So that's the idea that I had in mind when I was thinking mostly about, rather than developing a plugin for every single software out there, perhaps it's a more healthy way to allow in a way an easy way of connecting, and then depending on your practice, you can easily, you know, connect to the workflows. Another thing that I wanted to add, like you're talking about, you're mentioning the first question about you know, the design briefs and so on. And in that regard, yes, I think there is a responsibility on my side when it comes to Versur to try to put out in a way certain skills, certain tools in a way that these agents have, so that it makes it very easy in a way for users to, if they want to extract, for example, you know, the design catalog out of their design projects. Perhaps, you know, on my side, I have already then skills and tools that allow for that. And as a user, then you just have to engage with that. And then perhaps if you have problems that are more specific to your own practice, then those are the ones where you can yourself create the skill for the agent, create a tool for the agent, create the context for the agent, and so on.
Okay, sorry. It just reminds me, I lost the question maybe. Have you like learned or chased this currently quite popular cloud boat? It's actually allowed everyone to build their own flows. So my question is how you would like to, if it's a more generic workflow, everyone can like set up their own. What's the computational advantage of your software towards this one cloud boat, which is more like a from
cloud bot? This is from Anthropic, or which one?
Oh
That's
no,
Anthropic,
it's a no, it's a someone who just did it in 10 days. But this guy now is blowing everyone's mind because you only have a Mac or whatever setups, you can set your own agent. Especially using on Mac, it can. This is the agent, the real agent that can using your softwares to set up the flow by itself. So you don't have to set the flows. It by itself set up the flows and use the
I think
softwares to finish your task. So the task is the objective. Other things, the workflow, it doesn't matter. It just see how to strategize the workflow to get it done. Yeah, please look into it if you haven't. Yeah.
But for me, it's always like, you know, there are a couple of other platforms that for sure offer a sort of agentic workflow building and so on. And like N8N comes to my mind, you know. But what's happening is always like, you know, in architecture, we always deal with very specific, in a way, problems that all those kind of platforms, they're not really addressing. You know, they're very generic for the, you know, broader kind of industry. And then unless you want to like literally create your own kind of custom applications, you're not going to be able to really use them efficiently. I mean, you can use them for sure for, email copy and, customer surveys and so on. But if you're saying that I want to use N8N, for example, for a very specific particular design, structural design kind of problem, I'm going to do that, There are multiple implications that then, those kind of tools don't have, yeah? And then as architects, and I'm saying as architects because also on your end, also like the same kind of trajectory, like first you were an architect and then you start in a way to think about like how to develop kind of tools for architects. And I think that's where in a way our advantage is, because we start in a way to understand like the needs of our profession, and whatever kind of tools, methods we are building, they are kind of tailored for that, yeah. So in that sense, then I'm not necessarily worried about a competition that addresses, let's say, a very broad kind of market, just because Versur is not trying to address that kind of broad market. It's trying in a way to see like how can we operationalize in a way this kind of layer in architecture, and then any kind of tools that are going to be developed and a feature that are going to be added in the future, they are going to revolve around architectural questions, not so much like very broad kind of questions.
Yeah, actually, this is exactly why I asked the first question. All right. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wan Hu. Sorry, okay, I can get my video going. Yeah. So, I mean, I've got a question, but just to follow up from Wan Hu, I think that, I've got a slightly pejorative view of architectural culture, right? I mean, in a sense that, if you think about what Arcadia was about, like I fairly early on, I got the impression that really all Arcadia is kind of like those guys who could use Grasshopper in design. It didn't really get much more complex than that, and I think we're kind of generalists in some senses. And those who go deep into any question can almost suffer for not being understood. I could imagine that some very sophisticated papers have been turned down from Arcadia because they've not been understood. I won't go down that road, but a similar thing happens, frankly, in the world of theory. If you've got somebody who's really serious about theory, like Andre Radman at TU Delft, exceptionally in charge of the whole discipline, nobody understands what he's talking about. Absolutely nobody understands that. And I met that myself with my book Camouflage. Not everyone understood that book. But anyway, so I think in some senses, possibly of these different modalities, there probably needs to be a kind of slightly generic, kind of user-friendly thing that's more like Grasshopper that they could just log into without having to face this barrage of questions about trying to customize the system themselves. Anyway, I've got a question. So in a way, one of the challenges has been in terms of how to describe this world of computation, of AI, of software, whatever, has been the kind of the way in which people use language. And one of the big issues I have right now is with someone like Yuval Harari, who's a very, very popular commentator on AI. But if you were to fact check him on most of his things, if you use ChatGPT to fact check him, you would discover that actually he's got it completely wrong. In a sense that I think part of the way, what is his agenda? I think part of it is to come up with something provocative. He wants to sensationalize things in some ways, and also he wants to kind of make it explicable in kind of in terms that most people would understand. So he resorts to to words that I think are hugely problematic. He recently came up with a comment that AI lies. Well, that it does not lie. It works out, that what is the most effective strategy. It doesn't belong to the world of kind of a moral compass. It has no such thing as that. It doesn't really have intentionality and all those kind of things. So you cannot, if you say it lies, you're effectively anthropomorphizing the whole thing. And that, I think, is really the problem of Yuval Harari. Now, it also comes down to the question about tools. Recently, I mean, I say the opposite to him, right? I say that basically AI is a tool. And it really depends on who uses it and for what. And he says, no, no, no. In fact, I think he quoted, I'm sure he almost like quoted me because I give the example, if you cut up your vegetables with a kitchen knife, that's one thing, then you could murder someone. Well, he used exactly the same metaphor, description, except he used a salad rather than vegetables. But he says, no, 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 it's not just a tool. It's a tool that has decision-making capabilities. Well, I seriously question that. And it depends really what you mean by decision making, right? Because the term decision making can slide from a very kind of mechanical principle towards what we as humans understand as decision making. So, for example, a thermostat can decide when to switch on the heating. And that's one extreme. And then at the human extreme, basically there's the whole domain of intentionality and so on. That is, and I don't think that these tools are at that level as yet. And I think it's wrong to use the word decision making because it anthropomorphizes, and it assumes that they are at the level of humans. Now, then the question of agency comes up, and that falls into a similar kind of situation, because on the one hand, we remain in charge. That's I think the general perception, that with agentic AI, the user remains in charge. At the same time, there is a certain delegation of responsibilities to make these, as it were, decisions. But I think it's decisions only in the very narrow sense of decisions. I mean, almost a bit like the thermostat and the radiator. In which sense, if I were to make a comparison, I would say, well, maybe the analogy to be used is something like the military, right? There's somebody, in charge. The general tells the colonel, the colonel tells the captain, whatever. There's a delegation, and there are instructions to do something. So how much agency does the person at the end of the line have when they've been given instructions? Okay, leave that behind. So ultimately, the question is, I think the term agentic AI, in its use of language, tends to summon up a sense of agency that is not really there. And this is so my problem in general about AI is that the way it operates is so different. The mechanical intelligence of AI is so different to the biological intelligence of the human brain that I tend to use the term alien intelligence to try and to talk about it, say it is intelligence, but I want to use the word alien, not because it's from outer space, but because it's so radically different from the human way of thinking. And I think the term agentic AI risks that sort of that problem of being misinterpreted in some ways. But that's my view. I'm interested in what your view is.
Yeah, I think we always like also when we talk about humans, it's always like a question of degrees of agency, because whatever we are doing in our life, we are not going to have full agency. Like like this analogy with business owners saying that, I'm my own boss. And that's why, and that's not true. You're not your own boss. Your clients are your boss now, So you have a certain agency for sure that somebody that is just employed doesn't have that agency, but also you are constrained in a way there. So you don't have full agency. So I think the same, like also when we work with design and any other kind of tools that we engage with, as designers, we have degrees of agency as well. Because, for example, with Grasshopper, I can engage with Grasshopper and have zero agency in that process. While I can engage with it, if I know how to engage in a more appropriate way with it, I might gain more agency. Or I can say I'm going to use swarm intelligence, and you might say, well, swarm intelligence is by itself, it's going to generate something. So then, as a designer, I have zero agency there, and not really. I have a different kind of degree of agency there. My agency now and my impact there, it's mostly in defining the behaviors and then let the system run. Yeah, but you see, like why I'm giving this example is because there's no such thing as pure agency, like complete agency. Yeah, it's always degrees. And I think then for us as humans, we live in that kind of like constrained like degrees of agency. I think also when it comes to these kind of models, like there are degrees of agency, because you might say, well, you have a workflow, it's very smart, but it's still confined in a way to the structure of the workflow, in the sense of like, at this point, it's not able to create its own kind of branches, which is that a big, a hard technical problem? No, probably it's not a hard technical problem. It's just a matter of like, okay, it doesn't make sense, But I think, yeah, like from my perspective, I can say certain tools have certain levels of agency, but I'm not going to say like human level. I'm going to say that, a switcher, it's almost like to say I have two valves and one is open, one is closed. So I cannot have the option of both of them being open. So then is that really agency, or I'm just going with the one that's open, So at that level, probably, yeah, we don't have agency. That's not agency at all. That's just, I'm just following, in a way, the path of least resistance, or how we can call it. But I think if we think about AI and certain models, depending on how you're setting them up, you can allow them to have quite a high level of agency. If you start to create an AI agent where you really constrain it, and the way that you describe, in a way, the task and the problem that it has to solve, if you ask it in a very, very deterministic way, you are going to really get, in a way, a very like common determinist, very deterministic kind of outcome. So I think it's always like it's never black and white. It's always like a sort of gray kind of depends. And I don't like to give this kind of depends kind of questions, but answers. But I think it does depend. It does depend like how you structure it, how flexible you're making it. In Grasshopper, going back to Grasshopper, making the reference. In Grasshopper, when I was developing for Coop Himmelb, like a lot of this kind of like parametric models, if I were developing the tool as I'm the only one that's going to use this tool, the Grasshopper definition that I would develop would be quite different than if I were to say that I have to develop this so that multiple other designers in the office can use it. So suddenly, in a way, there you see like just by being cognizant of what's the need and how I have to structure things, I can create something that is more flexible, more versatile versus less versatile. So I think here is the same question, Dan. The same kind of idea. I can create an agent that is very, very tailored to only one single task, and it's not able to reason at all anything else, beyond that, just because that's how I build it. But if I want to have it in a way, see perhaps patterns that I'm not able to see as a human, perhaps I have to not prompt it, but I have to give it the context in a way and create the instruction in a way that allows, for that to happen, So that will be like where the agent, although I'm saying like, hey, you have to explore for me a pavilion design, but because I structured, the instruction in such a way, the pavilion is going to be like, the agent is going to be like, well, a pavilion is not the best solution in this situation, yeah? You understand what I mean? So depending on how I'm instructing with that agent to act, it might come across as very low agency, or it can come across as high agency, because it's able to deviate in a way from the initial prompt.
Maybe I could just want to open up to other people's questions. So just one quick question to follow up from that. On the your favorite image, I think, was just of a building on a kind of cliff. There's a kind of basement with a kind of whatever it is, and I looked at that and I thought, I wonder what was the criteria for that, to come up with this thing. I mean, maybe it was for holding water, or it wouldn't be very useful as an art gallery, say, And I'm trying to think, if maybe, I don't know if you could summon up that particular image, but just to show people what I was referring to. But it's the first one in your chat.
So those ones at the moment, like
could you put it up on the screen just to show people what we're referring
these
to?
Ones. None of the. We are talking about this one or different.
Wait, no, we can't see. You got to put it. You got to share screen.
Okay. Sure, I can. What now?
It's just come. It hasn't come on yet. It's just yes. that one. Maybe you could just shift it up a bit so we could. Oh, we lost it again. Um,
Yeah, maybe
there
you
are
have
several versions of it, but we're not seeing at the moment.
you mean this one like a tower or?
Yeah, no, that one there. That's what you several iterations. Could we get that on the screen? It's enough to the yes, that one. That one, yeah. Now,
So
what is
just
that
to make sure,
debate? Yeah,
just
yeah.
to make sure, like this is like the tower, like a tower, yeah, the one like a
Yes,
tower.
that's the one. That's the one.
Okay,
That's exactly the one
okay,
I was talking about, the one that you just
okay.
showed.
Yeah. So
Now,
here, for
so
example,
can we just
is
get on the screen? Yeah, yeah. So at the bottom bit there, where there's this rather beautiful kind of like I don't know, vessel or something,
yeah.
and so my question would be is kind of like I could see if it was based on aesthetics, you'd see that's clearly a beautiful form, right? But so then these agents are working together in negotiating what the outcome would be. Now, at some level, sure, you know what agents are looking for, but can you actually determine and understand the way that they're evaluating and voting, to use a term from A Thousand Brains, and voting for the answer? Is that not still a bit of a black box? I mean, so if you see this form, I mean, could you explain to me why it's produced that beautiful thing at the bottom?
Well, that's hard to tell probably. But
Yes, exactly.
when it comes to evaluation, like the evaluation for sure, like currently you have different kind of evaluator or aesthetical evaluator kind of agents, and you can define for them to say what does it mean, like um, a good image. For example, you can say you have to evaluate the fractal complexity, fractal dimension of the image, for example. Yeah. So that's a certain like aesthetical quality perhaps that I'm interested in. So I can say, okay, so this is one aspect that the agent has to consider when it's going to evaluate the image. Then what are things like I can say, I also want to make sure that the outcome actually aligns with the initial request of the user. Yeah. So I'm going to input that. Then I'm going to say, okay, I need another kind of evaluation for other kind of criteria there. So you can, in a way, list in a way all these criteria that are important and for you as a designer. And based on that, in a way, then you allow the agent, okay, you have to give, in a way, certain ranges. You can also say, like, I consider an image to be of good aesthetical quality only if it's about 0.5%, let's say, or 50% or something of the criteria. So like that, in a way, you give, certain ranges, in a way, to the agent that it's able to move between. And like that, it knows, okay, for this fractalic dimension of the image, I'm below 50. So what do I have to do? Do I go back and redo the prompt? And I start to, create a completely new kind of iteration. And then to see, in a way, like to get there. And if I start to add memory then to the agent, which I have blocks for memory, if you start to add memory, then you start to have an agent that now it's aware of its past iterations. So this is the problem, with genetic algorithm. If you remember the discussion, about genetic algorithm, and this kind of like morphodynamic versus morphogenetic kind of approaches in computational design, in generative design. It was this issue of, in morphogenetic, you have iterations that are adapting to past kind of iterations, while with genetic algorithms, every single iteration is not aware of the previous one. Yeah. So here, then, if you start to add, like also a memory to it, then you can start, to have an agent that self-improves. Yeah. It's always like, okay, I'm evaluating against these criteria. I'm below this score. What do I have to change? I'm going to change this. The result, is it improving? It's not. So it's going to keep on looping in a way. And as a user, you can define in a way that logic in your workflow. And you can say, you're going to have 10 tries. And after 10 tries, if you're not making it, then you have to ask for my approval, or you have to ask for guidance,
Can I just a very quick follow-up question? Sorry, I don't want to hog this one. I'm going to invite other people to come and ask questions. But when you, just as from the illustrations that we haven't seen today, but you gave us for the book, and you get what seems to come out is a kind of point cloud in terms of the thing in its operation. Maybe you did show it today. I'm not sure, but and so how do you shift from what appears to be a point cloud into some kind of planar architecture that we can read and use?
Well, that functionality right now is not implemented in Versur. But yeah, that's a good question that I don't think I have an answer to.
Okay. Okay.
I don't think I have an answer to that.
Good.
I mean, I want to be honest. I don't want to
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's the big challenge. Okay. All right. I will keep quiet and hand over to Joseph and others to ask their questions.
Thanks, Neil. And Daniel, amazing presentation, and congratulations on really a groundbreaking tool that's setting a completely new framework for how we think about collaborating with AI. And many people may or may not know that starting 4 years ago, at Florida Atlantic, you taught the first studio that was required for all undergraduate architecture students to learn at AI at an advanced level. And within that studio, there was a fundamental shift from focusing on the design of the end product to teaching students how to design workflows, processes, and systems. And now seeing this within your tool, how you're making that kind of framework accessible to everyone is really amazing. And for me, the idea of designing workflows and the way in which you're thinking about it as well, it keeps reminding me of the analog, which would be kind of like an interdisciplinary collaboration, and how we think about those collaborations as ways to sometimes tackle really challenging problems. If we want to change the way we, build more sustainably and reduce the carbon footprint of how we build, we can't just design and build anymore. We actually have to design new ways of building. So I'm kind of curious, earlier in your presentation, you spoke about hallucinations, and you mentioned how, well, maybe hallucinations aren't the best for structure, but they're great as a kind of creative collaborator.
Yeah.
But I'm also kind of curious, sometimes happy accidents are really great, or being irrational can be really great, even for structure. I can think about a building where if we said, oh, roof is foundation, well, that's the opposite of what we think about foundation. But if roof was foundation, then suddenly we can hang things and suspend things from the ceiling. And so it becomes a different way about thinking about structure and architectural opportunities. And so I'm kind of curious within this workflow and moving forward, how you're thinking about that kind of back and forth balance between intentionally having opportunities for hallucinations to be kind of a creative collaborator or instrument to think with, as feedback, and sometimes being the balance of allowing us to identify a new happy accident or changing our criteria, and then how we build in some performance-based kind of qualifiers to start to refine that new trajectory that was established. And again, it seems like your framework is starting to allow for that kind of nonlinear thinking. I was wondering if you can speak a little bit more about that and the possibilities of how that might start to open up.
Yeah, so here probably can see here this kind of slide that you have here. So most of the agents that I have right now in the interface, they have that kind of slider like deterministic versus generative in a way. Yeah? And what that means is that in certain instances, I want to use a language model that it's allowed to make things up, just because happy accidents and so on. Yeah. But in other instances, for example, when I'm saying that I need to have an AI agent that it should sort out in a way certain things in a data set and then give me in a way the sorted data. In that instance, I cannot afford in a way hallucinations. So then I have to tone down in a way that kind of slider. So that slider there that you see with generative versus deterministic, depending where you put that slider, that increases the chances of the agent in a way hallucinating and making things up or not. Yeah. So for sure, like if I want to allow that kind of opportunity in the design process, it's still going to be my decision as a designer. Like I have to take that I have to take that decision like intentionally, and say for this specific point in the process, in the workflow, I have to allow for maximum kind of creativity, let's say, yeah, and that allow in a way the system to make things up. And perhaps I'm just going to have then a system of how I'm going to filter that out to select in a way which are good options, yeah. So for me, like the system is already there. I think what's missing right now, perhaps a lot of like examples of showing how this could work. And I think this is something that I'm going to be working on relentlessly in the next weeks and months, like trying to show all these kind of scenarios, like that each one of you were asking about today. From my side, because I'm the one who developed it, I feel that yes, it's able to do it, but probably they're not yet the demos to show that that's possible. But that's how I'll think about it. I don't know if that's answering your question, Joseph, but you know that I'm always thinking from this kind of perspective of I see design as one of the most complex human behaviors, and it's always we have to work with the multimodal way. We always have to kind of almost like we are schizophrenic in a way. Like 1 second I have to think about like macro, and then something a micro, then I have to think about at the abstract level and suddenly a very specific level and so on. Yeah. So my approach is always like that. And I think also like the way that the Versur is built, it's trying to mimic in a way that kind of flexibility that we should have in design.
No, I think the way you're describing the tool and the way you've presented it today, I mean, it shows that it's allowing design to be a little bit like second order cybernetics, where we're designing these conversations, but then we're able to zoom out and have a meta reflection on the conversation we just had, so we can go backwards in the process in a less linear fashion. And I think that's pretty amazing. And that's where, again, I think the idea of having a happy accident that starts to derail an entire process, and now you're changing the way you're evaluating what you did before because it's actually a different question. I think your tool starts to have that power, is the way it looks, is to me, from my observation. And yeah, I'm excited to hopefully get an opportunity to uh, play with it in a rigorous fashion in the near future. And
I
again,
think
congratulations. Yeah.
thank you very much, Joseph. Thank you. I think I mean all these kind of questions for sure, they're very helpful because they're prompting me to think about certain things. And for sure there is maybe room for this kind of idea where can we have a system that allows the exploration to go beyond the initial assumption in a way. And what I mean by that is right now, like we can for sure like define a workflow that keeps in mind all these kind of ideas of happy accidents and so on, but that's still something that you have to foresee in a way and try to think ahead in the future to think about like, in case that this kind of accident happens, then I have to write somehow the instruction for the agent to know that that's acceptable. Yeah. But I think what's going to be interesting is when there's going to be a mode of operation where you start something, the agent starts to execute the workflow, realizes a better option, and then starts to reconfigure or start to delete and create completely new workflow. Because like that, I think that's where probably you really push like to the maximum the idea of happy accident. Because otherwise, all the happy accidents are within your within the world that you're able to describe through instruction. That's where the happy accidents are happening. But they're not outside of your, this kind of discussion that breaks is always like about the subconscious and so on. Yeah. So Briggs is always, Wolf Briggs always talking about that. And probably he's talking about that kind of idea of like, how do I get outside of my world and find those kind of happy accidents, Because what you're describing as well, it's like probably that's what the kind of happy accident that you're talking about, not the happy accident that you're already anticipating in a way that's going to happen, perhaps, So you're looking for a happy accident that maybe you don't even think about. But I think for that, then you have to have a system that probably it's able to reconfigure itself and rethink in a way the initial assumption and reconfigure in a way the workflow. And yeah, I might have to write that down on a to-do list, perhaps.
Well, like some during the pandemic, my kind of thought of what defines intelligence for architectural intelligence was kind of start simple, be irrational, and don't forget to forget. And so I think, yeah, I mean, kind of intentionally setting up a scenario where we can see things through different lenses, and also test things that are irrational because it starts to create a problem for ourselves, which means we have to create a new architectural solution that we haven't seen before. I think those are really exciting. I mean, even Patrik, because Patrik was mentioned earlier today, he talks about cutting a hole in a floor is really a dumb idea, but when you think about it, having a hole in a floor is great because it suddenly allows all this kind of other social communication between people at different levels, and so there's so yeah, I think, but sometimes that irrationality we don't that's not our intuition. It just happens through the process. And again, but I love the way that we can kind of zoom out and see this entire set of workflow and kind of go backwards as way of going forward. And yeah, and I think it's, yeah, like I said, I think it's an amazing tool. It's the most advanced tool I've seen for AI for creativity within architecture.
Thank you, Joseph.
Yeah. So maybe I think that's something I forgot to mention. If anybody's got any question who's watching on YouTube, please put it into the YouTube chat and we can relay it here. I've got a couple of questions. I know that Angelica wants to ask a question, but let me ask your question. Like some of my Doctor of Design students are watching this and they're having debates among themselves. And it says their concern is it might be too complex to use, I would say. That was seems to be the underlying concern. They want something that's going to be super interesting, simple, and they refer to the guy from Midjourney who was really concerned to make things as simple as possible. But I've got a particular question from Bettina, who is a professor in India. She also already has a PhD, but she's a Doctor of Design student as well, getting a second doctorate. I want to ask about how agents talk to each other. Will there be errors because they clash with each other's intent? How do they evaluate, in other words, their different decisions? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's a sort of could be a problem. Like I think this is a question of like always thinking. It's similar with how we started to think about geometry with Grasshopper. The same way we can start to think about intelligence and how like certain AI models are going to output things, and consider in a way then these kind of possibilities and these kind of issues that might arise. So then, which is the kind of a safeguard in a way that I have to put in place there to make sure that that's not the case. Yeah. So currently, like I will say, the system is robust enough in a way not to mingle in a way information in a way that is not relevant. But it could happen in a way that you have certain agents that have certain contradictions. And I think for that, you just have to create a resolution, like a sort of mechanism for how do you solve those, like similar with Jeff Hawkins, about the brain. And it's almost like you have all these kind of senses in a way that collect the information and give it to your brain, or not to your brain, but sort of bigger pool of data. And then you create a sort of consensus. And that consensus is what we call, in a way, the experience with the object. Yeah. So I would imagine it's a similar thing like that. You have to probably think of a strategy of if that might happen, then how you deal with that, how you mitigate for that. When it comes to the question about the PhD students, I'm always thinking about this kind of question that also Elon Musk was bringing up when it comes to AI and how we as humans interface with AI. And why I'm bringing that up, because he's always pointing out like how low a bandwidth we are in comparison with the high speed and or high bandwidth that you have with AI models. And for me, it's this kind of question of we can for sure as architects retrieve and say we are going to rely mostly on just images, and we are just going to get this kind of very, very easy to use, perhaps Midjourney. But that means we are going to give up like a lot of agency and control in a way over the process. So then for me, it's more healthy to think about it as, can I find ways that for sure they're not perhaps the easiest to learn, but ways that are going to help us in a way as architects to still be able to face all this kind of AI kind of tsunami that is going to come, and have a sort of interface that will allow us to interact with that kind of reasoning of the AIs and be able to orchestrate and direct it. Because the alternative is simply like I just have a chat box chat box, and I just type in a prompt, and without any input from me or without knowing exactly what's doing, it's just going to generate something, and then I'm going to call it architecture, And I don't think that's a healthy way in a way to look at it. I think it's more appropriate to think about like how do we expand our human capabilities in a way to adapt in a way to this new technology. So the new, I'll say like this new technology is not about we are going back to Photoshop kind of level of user friendly. I think it's a different kind of level of understanding, the same way that switching from analog to computation, we had to change in a way the way we are thinking about architecture and the way we conceptualize things to be able in a way to grasp and see and understand how we develop in a way workflows like that. So I see it the same way also here, Dan. It's not so much to default to Midjourney. It's easier. And by the way, like not beating on Midjourney, but unfortunately right now, like lately, they are not necessarily the most relevant. If you look at all the other kind of AI models that came out and their capabilities. Of course, if you're more on the artist side, then yes, probably it's still more relevant. But if you're more side of disciplines, creative disciplines, where you have to produce a industrial design, or you have to produce something in the real world, I don't think it's so helpful anymore. It's very good for ideation, but not beyond that. So I think, again, maybe I'm repeating myself, but I do think that we have to think about like where is going to be the future of this. We are going to have multiple AIs interacting among us, in the real world. And are we going to be passive observers, or are we going to be active, active agents in that interaction? And if we choose to say that we are going to be active agents in that interaction, then we do have to understand the language of the AIs in a way. And we do have to figure out a way to develop and elevate our way of thinking in architecture beyond purely just representation then.
So we've got a couple of questions in the chat. Angelica has a question. Angelica, do you want to ask your question, or do you want me to read it out?
Yes. No,
Okay.
I can ask. Thank you, Daniel. Great presentation. I'm really a fan of your work, and I use your citations on all my papers. So my first question is about the agency. So can we say the agentic workflow is run with AI subsymbolic agents, which is the black box at the end, working on a rule-based system orchestrated by the human agents, like we would be like the symbolic personification of the rule system. So we can manage all these subsymbolic systems which work with black box into a ruled system, which means like the workflow would be this system that we can control. Can you say that? I mean,
it's almost, can you restate that? Just
yeah, it's about symbolic AI and subsymbolic AI. Okay, my question. So we know that Gen AI is a subsymbolic system which works based on data learning, and AI that works with the symbolic systems is about rule-based systems.
Yeah.
Right? So can we see that the workflow itself is a kind of a rule system that we humans can control the subsymbolic AI, which is the Gen AI. So it's a way that we can control, it's an effort to control the outputs and the hallucinations or the creative side. So we can manage and orchestrate it on a way that we can get the outputs closer to what we want.
I'm not sure if I will describe it necessarily as a rule based. And maybe I don't have the right description for you. How else would you describe it? But like when we are saying like rule based, or at least in my mind when I'm saying that, I'm always saying that pretty much all the outcome of the system is a priori defined in a way. If you have a rule based, it's just going to act based on the rules and just be confined to the rules in a way. But here, like I'm just thinking that could be that it's a rule base. Maybe I don't have a better description for it. And maybe I
Yeah,
have to think about it.
like how you call the workflow, like
Yeah.
you establish the workflow. That's why I'm
Yeah, yeah.
calling the rule system. It's like a system that you establish,
Yeah,
not the
yeah.
AI. So you put all these AI agencies working together on a system that you worked out, or you can change or manage. So it's
Yeah.
a way for you to manage the AI, which is subsymbolic, which is a black box. So it's one way that we can cope with the eagerness of architects of wanting to determine or make things on a way that we want. Like my workflow would be different than yours, depending on what I want. And so I'm making the rules. This is what I'm calling rules. Like my system is my workflow, and I'm making the rules of my workflow. So it's in a way that I can calibrate the different AI agencies, because they are running on a subsymbolic system.
Yeah.
I'm trying to theorize a little bit of
like,
trying to understand
like,
how can we organize things.
Angelica, I would love to hear your thoughts, like, later when we keep on thinking through this, like how you theorize it. Because yeah, for me, like for sure, I wouldn't necessarily put it into a category of rule-based. Although, like, I understand like what you mean by that. You're saying you're the one like almost like predefining the workflow of it.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking, like, is that a bad thing or a good thing? Because for sure, when we talk about like symbolic AI and so on, like, or when we talk about rule-based versus learning-based kind of systems, learning system versus expert systems, in that instance, we are talking about the intelligence in a way, but here we are talking about the orchestration of intelligences. And then for sure, there is a set of rules perhaps that we use then to create the orchestration. And I'm just wondering, is that a bad thing or a good thing? Because what's happening, like the reason why I'm pro this kind of approach and this kind of workflow is this kind of aspect that I keep on mentioning about deterministic versus generative, where in certain parts of a process, you don't need generative AI. You can use a rule-based kind of system, and it's going to do a better job than if you use a generative. But that rule-based system might be just one tiny node in your entire workflow. So can you then, as a designer, say, I have my input there is that always then when you have to address this question, you always have to answer it through this kind of model that is more rule-based, And then always when you have to answer the other kind of question, then you can explore the other options in a way. So I'm just wondering, in a way, is that rule-based? Perhaps, yes, we can call it rule-based, but is that something that limits, in a way, our exploration, or it's something that actually it's healthy in a way in the exploration? And I feel, in a way, that's a bit more toward the side of like, it's a benefit in a way, because this allows us then, in a way, to bring all these kind of tools that, you have different kind of tools, like, even processing or other kind of tools, Java and writing code and so on. You can bring those that are more deterministic and combine them in a way with a process that's more generative. And I think that's fine.
The ones that are controlling the system are the AI agents with our large language models, right? So they are subsymbolic. So
correct.
It's a way to try to cope.
But it's a question of like, yes, those are still language models, but it's me as a designer that can think and decide like what kind of level of control do I allow in a way this kind of system, Because, for example, it's the same thing also when it comes to the version of models. For example, right now we have Claude 4.6, I believe, like Opus 4.6, which is one of the strongest models. I don't need that throughout my entire workflow, because it's redundant in a way. I'm using a Ferrari to drive in a way one block, like it doesn't make sense. I can use a Ferrari for something else, So then as a designer, I can still decide that. And I don't see necessarily as a problem. Perhaps we can call it rule-based. That's fine. But probably I don't see it as something bad. That's what I'm saying. When I'm talking about rule-based in the context of AI, I see it bad when it comes to generating intelligence, but not so much when I'm defining in a way like the kind of strategy of something,
Because when we Yeah, sorry. When we can identify, that's the gap that we have, like the generative AI that cannot connect directly to BIM or Rabbit, like the news questions, point clouds. So, and I understood that this is basically because the kind of AI that's been used in BIM is the symbolic AI, which is optimization, right? So how can we try to do this leap from one to the other? That's the big issue now. But one way to cope and to try to manage the Gen AI is to build a system like you did already and that you're doing. So we can have the human agents we can have more agency and define what we want and direct to what we want. So I think that's a great solution that you're organizing now. So.
Yeah, I think that's probably the more healthy way to think about it, because with Gen AI, like you're not going to develop now like Revit models of Gen AI, you know. Like we talked quite a bit about this issue of, you know, as a profession, we don't have enough data to actually train those kind of models, and that's fine, you know, we don't have to. But we could also consider that to say that, you know, if a language model is like an interface, and that interface allows me in a way to interact with other kind of softwares, then can I say that I'm going to have an AI agent that is going to be able to see like all Rhino commands in a way, and then I'm going to give it a set of examples of how one would model something in Rhino, and then I can have that agent in a way suddenly interacting now with Rhino and being able to kind of generate.
Yeah, there is one system that's doing that now, Raven.
Yeah.
You can use their LLM, and then it's already connecting the nodes, and it's one step ahead that. So
yeah.
It's not about writing a prompt and then having the whole project done. I don't think this is the way. So how they can help us to build a process, right?
Yeah. So for me, like I think for sure, like I agree that it feels a bit rule based, but I'm just wondering if that's bad, you know, because it's the same discussion about. I mean, certain tools, we use them because those are the most appropriate tools to use. And maybe that should be the evaluation metric in a way that we use. For example, Excel, it's a quite old software. I'll say that there are plenty of better softwares to do what Excel does. And for some reason, it's still one of the most used softwares when it comes to, you know, like table data and stuff like that, you know. And in that case, it's like we have a tool that does exactly what it's supposed to do. So creating a completely new one doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, you know, is the aspect of us as designers creating a sort of rule set to create a workflow. Is that a problem? Is that a limitation? If it is a limitation, then yes, you know, probably we have to start thinking about like, how do we move outside of this limitation? If not, if this is like the best kind of practice, and that's what gives us in a way control over the process, that's what allows us in a way to determine where the human it's in the loop and where not. We are the ones defining like where to use what tools like Revit and so on. If that's in a way more appropriate way for our profession, then I don't have necessarily a problem, you know.
But so, I think the solution is the one that you're already using with Versur. It's just we are building workflows. It's we're not building. That's the when I say rules, not in a bad way, but we are. My meaning of rules is baking the workflow again according to what I want. So this is my. If I teach my students to know how to design a workflow, then they can do whatever they want. So I think this is the great answer now. You're like a meta architect, not just coordinating those things. So
this is what like also if Joseph is still here, but this is what we are also like trying to teach students in a way to think in these kind of terms of workflows and building in a way methods and workflows and so on. And I think, you know, developing that kind of way of thinking, that's a transferable kind of skill. It doesn't matter if you apply it in architecture or somewhere else, but it's always like this kind of process and methods and always thinking about kind of issue of we know this expression. If you all you have it's a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So sometimes, yeah, like I think it's healthy in a way in design to think about workflows and try to build workflows and try to think through steps of workflows and so on, and try to be critical about like, do I need a Gen AI here? Do I need like a deterministic model? Do I need, you know, a simple, like, you know, a linear regression model here? And if yes, then do I have, in a way, the platform to allow me to connect all these kind of modes of operation that as a designer I have to go through, you know? And I think for me, that's where I'm aiming, in a way. Is like, I see design as this kind of one of the most complex human behaviors. So then it's a question of like, how do I allow designers, in a way, an environment where they can work at all these kind of levels and modalities and levels of abstraction, and where they can go like simple workflows and very complex workflows, and workflows that are speculative, workflows that are very that are not deterministic, very pragmatic, you know. So I think that's, for me, that's where I'm mostly thinking of it, like which is the appropriate tool to use for this design problem, and that's how we have to think about it. Yeah.
Great. My last question is more mundane, just I think you kind of answered it. Just do we have to, when you use Versur, do you have to connect to different APIs that we already have, or do you have basic APIs that we use, and does it work only on cloud, or do you have to, can you download it or something? How exactly does this?
So right now it's just cloud. It's just on cloud, and what you'll have is you have an option. Let's see if there's. You see, you have here advanced mode. Like when I'm opening a node here, you have advanced mode. So advanced mode is going to allow you to, in case that you want to use a specific like API for any kind of model, then you can provide your own API. If the advanced mode is off, then it's going to automatically use the API of the not API, but the models of the platform. So you have that flexibility, because sometimes and probably in the future I'm going to add this kind of flexibility where you can fine-tune your own model on, you know, OpenAI or other kind of you know, image-based kind of models, and then you can easily just, you know, port it here. But it does allow right now, you know, for if you have your own API, you can use your own API.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm on your waiting list. I'm eager to try it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I know like many people probably watching this, like, thank you, every single one of you that you've been so patient. But as you can see, like, as you can see, like, yeah, it was a massive undertaking for me. Like, this is an entire infrastructure that I had to build, like, to be able to have workflows that you are able to connect them, and agents that are able to stream data correctly from one to the other, and to be able to deploy the agents and run them somewhere else and so on. Like, it was a massive kind of infrastructure that I had to build beyond like just the interface, in a way. So I really appreciate like everyone that's on the wait list, and for your patience. So really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Maybe just to follow up that, because a couple of questions I've got from people. When will it be released exactly?
So this coming Monday, I'm going to start to release, and I'm going to go like a batch of probably 10, 20 people. So slowly, you know, just making sure that everything works smoothly on the platform. And if, you know, like if I'm reaching like 100 users and everything works fine, then probably I'm just going to open to everyone, you know. But right now, this is a beta release, meaning that there might be here and there certain bugs that, you know, maybe I didn't catch. And I'm going to start, like I said, you know, batches of 20 people, 10, 20 people that are on the wait list.
Okay, so the sooner they sign up, the better. We've got two further questions. I don't mean to call it a day, because it's been an incredible marathon session. In fact, some people finish the marathon quicker than this. Patana, who is in Bangkok, who has been live streaming today. It's great to see the Digital Futures so international. Patana's got a question. Do you want to read it out, Patana?
Yes. Yep. Daniel, thank you for the presentation. I got a question about when you built the platform, the Versur, what kind of level of knowledge of the user that you expect to have to be able to use this platform? Because many of the architects that I know, when they talk about this, the agentic AI, they expect that it should be easier than using Grasshopper itself, because many people didn't get to learn Grasshopper. They didn't know about the computational design, but the agentic AI comes in and they think that okay, it's going to be a new thing. But is it the way I see from the interface is that is it the progression from the computational design? I mean, like the people should know some the computational design first and then coming into this platform, or they can just jump right in and have a build up the new set of the knowledge and understanding. Yeah, that's my
So
question.
currently Versur, I produced like something like close to 50 workflows that are already like in the templates library, where once they are published, like every single Versur user is able to see those kind of templates. Yeah. So in case that you're the first time user, for sure, probably you're just going to go through those kind of that kind of library. You're going to drag in a way, or you're going to use in a way those templates, and then perhaps learn that kind of way. Now you see that the interface has two editors. One that is more canvas, like this kind of rows, that allows you still to create this kind of hierarchies and connect in a way different kind of strategies one to the other, but it's not, let's say, to the level of the node editor. Yeah. And the reason why I did it is because like I understand this reality in architecture where, you know, those that are computational designers for sure will have a easier time with a node-based kind of interface than those that don't. Yeah. So then, you know, if you're not very familiar with Grasshopper, then you can interact through the Canvas page. Yeah. And also the Canvas, like the Canvas page, you have these kind of rows that you can create as workflows. And if somebody else, you know, in the community developed a workflow that was published, and then you bring it into your user kind of account, then you can use here in the row, you can just say, okay, so somebody created an agent that looks at a design brief and automatically extracts in a way correctly the main design brief ideas in a way. Yeah. So you don't have to design yourself then that workflow. Somebody already shared it. So what you do is you just go on the Canvas page, you create a workflow road, and then you just select that workflow from that person, you know, and then you can run now like with this kind of more friendly interface for you, like that specific workflow. Yeah. So I do understand that you're going to be the same way like with Grasshopper. With Grasshopper, there are super users and just basic, let's say, or standard, let's say, users of Grasshopper, you know. So it's fine because the super users were creating, in a way, a lot of like the strategies and tools that then others were able to look at and copy and develop and so on, you know. So I imagine a similar kind of dynamic also here. You have two pages. One, if you're not very comfortable with node-based, you can then interact with the Canvas one. If you are comfortable with node-based, then you interact with the node-based, you know. And I think that's the beauty of it, you know. That's the beauty of it, because I do agree, and the same. Maybe a lot of the features that I'm adding here, it's also based on my my experience with practice, architecture, and developing tools for practice. Because very often, in a way, like you do create like a Grasshopper definition, and then you're sharing it with all the designers in the office. But because it's so advanced, you know, it's very hard for them to use it, you know. But here with Versur, then the idea would be that if you have a easy to use interface, you just need one person that is able to create a crazy kind of complex workflow, but then you interact with the same agent in an interface like this, you know, which is super like straightforward, simple in a way. Is that making sense?
Yeah, thank you. Can't wait to use it.
Thank you.
So just briefly, there's one more question from Valipon, who's gone to bed because it's so late in Bangkok. And this is a comment. First of all, the way that Versur supports exploratory mode is a good thing, whether happy accident or whatever. But for some architects who know exactly what they want, they stop using AI because it is difficult to control. So I want to know if by transforming design process into an agentic workflow, can this help with these problems? Controlling, in other words, controlling the desired result of AI.
Depends here what we are talking about, the desired outcomes, because if you are saying desired outcomes as in images, then it's a different kind of discussion. Because if you deal with language models, it's much easier just because you can provide context and you can provide examples of what's a good outcome and what's not a good outcome. While with a text-to-image model like Flux or other kind of models, maybe they are not the best at following the prompt, and very often it's a very random kind of process. But I think there is also, like, if you say I already have a design and I want to create variations on that design, then I just have to be aware. Probably I have to use Flux context, or maybe I have to use Nano Banana or something. So you have those kind of models that you have to play with. But that's the issue in a way. That's the issue on the side of text-to-image models, more than the other AI models that we have available. If it's, like I said, if it's purely just about I have a document, like a construction document that I have to evaluate, and perhaps I have to highlight issues like code compliance issues, that's more controllable than a text-to-image model is, But there are for sure there are ways, and perhaps over time we are going to develop like different kind of workflows that, for me, I don't see the process as that is just one process. I'm generating an image. I just input a prompt and then I have an image. I'm looking at that as that's just one node in the entire design process. Yeah. So what I can do is I can define in a way for that specific node, like, okay, you're going to need a control image, and then you're going to output something. So like that, and I'm going to also give you a style image, and then I'm going to output something. So in that way, then I can control the outcome, and then that's just going to be a node in the entire like workflow that I'm developing. And what you see here, like many of these are like that in the background. There are other kind of agents that when you look at one node like this, it's another agent workflow. Yeah. So for example, when I'm saying prompt evaluator, that's another kind of system that evaluates the prompt and correctly analyze it. Yeah. If I'm saying, hey, I'm going to use API for Nano Banana, for example, yeah, as a model, as an image generator model, what I can do then, I can say, I'm going to have an AI agent that's going to create prompts for Nano Banana. So how is it going to be able to do that? So I'm going to provide a couple of Nano Banana examples that we can easily find online to see in a way which is the appropriate way to write, structure in a way a prompt for Nano Banana. Yeah. So once I give that context to the AI agent, that's pretty much it. Yeah. Then every single prompt that I'm sending, doesn't matter if it's formatted correctly for Nano Banana or not, that agent is going to take care of it and format it correctly for Nano Banana, so that I can have control then over that generation. But I think this what I'm going to say next goes in line also with some other questions. My goal is to once I start to open up the platform to everyone, I'm going to try to have like probably a YouTube where I'm going to constantly in a way upload tutorials, examples of how to think about this. Because as I said, personally, I see it more almost like a grasshopper kind of moment in architecture, where you had to switch from this kind of analog thinking about architecture to a computational kind of way of thinking. And for sure, there's a bit of friction there to get people there. So that's why I'm I'm thinking of this kind of aspect of having a dedicated YouTube where I'm going to constantly, in a way, like show how to think about this, how to develop, in a way, workflows and so on.
I mean, one comment, Daniel, Reem Mosley, who's in Saudi Arabia, kind of made this comment. It feels like Grasshopper for AI models, and maybe that should be a branding line for you. But just to say, I mean, I think the secret of Grasshopper was, I mean, Grasshopper is not parametric; it's actually algorithmic. But the technique it uses of visualizing things, I think, was the powerful tool. And I suspect, just as a kind of suggestion, that really what really is required here is some very, very simple control panel that allows you to kind of almost vote yourself on what is most important in what you're doing. So, for example, in Midjourney, there's this kind of thing where you can vote on weirdness factor. I don't know why I'd want to vote on that at all. But if you had a panel where you could vote on structural concerns or environmental concerns or aesthetic concerns and vote accordingly, so it was simply visualizing what you're going to do, I think that would really make it accessible for everyone. So in other words, those who are really environmentally conscious would ratchet up the environmental thing and close down on the aesthetic thing. But I think that's the key thing. And I would finally finish with saying this. I think I've often been convinced that we are kind of chameleon-like creatures that privilege the visual. That's what we do the whole time as architects, and ignore everything else as a result of that. Because a chameleon, interestingly, I don't know if you know this, but chameleon cannot smell anything and it can't really hear anything, but it's got the most incredibly sophisticated optical apparatus. And I think that's both our strength and our weakness as architects. But anyway, so I think to make it sort of accessible from that domain would be really, really successful. Daniel, I think we should draw this to a close. I mean, it's not the close, it's the beginning in some ways, because I hope that we're going to come back and do some updates on this, because this is an incredible moment. I do think it's a Grasshopper moment, potentially, if it can be made accessible. And I think Batana's comments are very relevant here, that most people find Grasshopper difficult. But, I think it could well be a way forward. And, and even though I've not used it myself, I could see, from your comments, what you wrote about this, that, this is potentially a really important moment. We went from simple kind of straightforward design to algorithmic design to generative AI, and now agentic AI is the next step in that process, which hopefully will make it a really form of co-intelligence, to use the term that Ethan Bullock uses, where we're working with AI towards an end. So this has been an incredibly powerful and useful session. So I want to thank you so much. I also want to thank those teams that behind the team here who, there Batana, who's in Thailand, well, iPod, who's also in Thailand, and to those who are also watching, Angelica for her questions in Brazil. I think we're spanning the world, and hopefully this will become something that will have an effect. I mean, this is what Digital Futures International is all about: different languages, different internationally, and spreading the word. So I thank you so much for this. And thank you for all that's been involved. Thank you, Joseph, for your questions and so on. And we look forward to further development on this thing, because I think it is an important step. It has gone with its. I mean, it's. My question was always, what is agentic AI going to solve everything? That we haven't got to code everything? No, it seems like from what your experience is, you've got to work extremely hard to make things simple, which is my view. In terms of what design is all about, in order to make something minimalist, you have to work really hard to make it minimalist, and in also what writing is about. To make something clear, you have to work extra hard. So, thank you for all your efforts, Daniel, and let's hope that this turns into a tool that is used universally. So thank you again.
I think all the feedback from everyone, like that's what's going to turn it into a tool that everyone uses, because I'm coming from AI here, and I'm trying to bring it down in a way more and more and more to be able to make it accessible to everyone in a way. So for sure, in a way, I might feel that this level it's the most accessible, but interacting more and more with each one of you, I can sense in a way where perhaps to make it even more accessible for everyone, where there are frictions that are not necessary in a way, where the design process kind of like sidetracked just because headaches with interface or something, you know. So I think that's probably the next phase of this is that kind of process of massaging it and getting closer to where people really like enjoy using it.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe I should also mention Wan Yu in Shenzhen, who was also asked some interesting questions. This has been fantastic. It's been actually, in a way, partly what you're talking about, sort of an interrogation of different agents all talking together. That's what we've had today, a bunch of different commentators and with some fantastic questions. So thank you all. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.